There is a strange moment that happens somewhere between being broke and becoming wealthy. It doesn't happen when you buy a better car. It doesn't happen when you move into a bigger house. And it definitely doesn't happen when someone finally calls you rich. It happens quietly. One day an unexpected expense shows up, your car needs a repair, your rent goes up, your company cuts your hours. And for the first time, your reaction isn't panic. You just handle it. That is the first real sign that money is starting to change your life. Not because you have millions, but because money has stopped controlling every decision you make. And here's the part most people miss. Wealth doesn't transform your life all at once. It happens in levels. At each level, something different changes. Your stress changes. Your choices change. The way you work changes. The way you think about time changes. And eventually, even the way you see money itself changes. Today, we're walking through 7 levels of wealth. Not as a ranking of who's better or worse, but as a map of what actually changes as your financial position gets stronger. And the final level isn't about having the most money. It's about reaching the point where money becomes almost irrelevant to your everyday decisions. Let's start at the bottom. The first level is survival. You might have a few $100s, maybe nothing. Maybe you're carrying credit card debt while waiting for the next paycheck to arrive. Your bank account isn't really a savings account. It's a countdown. You know exactly when you're getting paid. You know exactly when rent is due. And you know which bills can wait 3 days without causing a disaster. An unexpected $100 expense doesn't feel like $100. It feels like a problem. A $100 repair can mean skipping groceries. A medical bill can mean using a credit card. A delayed paycheck can turn an ordinary week into a crisis. And that's what makes this level so exhausting. You're not necessarily spending irresponsibly. You're simply operating without a financial cushion. Every decision has consequences. You don't, do I want this? You ask, can I afford this right now? That distinction matters. Because when you're living at the survival level, money doesn't give you freedom. Money gives you permission to keep moving. And that's why advice like, just invest more, can sound almost insulting here. If your emergency fund is 0 and your credit card is charging 20% interest, your first goal isn't becoming wealthy. Your first goal is creating breathing room. Because the next level changes something important. You stop living one emergency away from falling backward. This is the stability level. Maybe you've built your first $5,000. Maybe it's 20. The exact number doesn't matter as much as what the money represents. A buffer. Your car breaks down. You fix it. Your phone dies. You replace it. Your employer cuts your hours for a month. You don't immediately panic. For the first time, an emergency is an inconvenience instead of a catastrophe. And that creates a psychological shift people rarely talk about. You sleep differently. You make decisions differently. You become less desperate. And desperation is expensive. When you need a paycheck desperately, you accept almost any job. When you need a client desperately, you accept terrible terms. When you need a deal desperately, you negotiate against yourself. But when you have enough money to survive a few bad months, you can finally say no. That single word is one of the first things wealth buys, not luxury. Leverage. You can walk away. And that becomes even more powerful at the next level. Level 3 is momentum. This is where your net worth starts becoming meaningful enough that your behavior begins to change. Maybe you've reached $50,000. Maybe it's 75. Maybe it's closer to 100. Again, the number isn't magical. What's important is that your money is no longer sitting completely still. You have savings. You have investments. You have retirement accounts. You may have equity in a business or a home. And suddenly, you're not only earning money, your money is participating. This is where compound growth starts becoming emotionally real. At $10,000, a 7% return produces about $700. Nice. But it doesn't change your life. At $100,000, that same 7% represents about $7,000 in a year. And at $500,000, it's $35,000. The percentage didn't change. You didn't suddenly become a better investor. The machine simply became bigger. This is why the first serious chunk of wealth can feel painfully slow. You're doing most of the work yourself. You earn. You say invest. You repeat. But eventually your capital starts carrying part of the load. And that creates a dangerous temptation. Lifestyle inflation. Because now you finally have money. You can afford the nicer car, the better apartment, the expensive vacation, the subscriptions you used to stare at and think, maybe someday. And there is nothing inherently wrong with enjoying your money. The problem starts when every increase in income immediately becomes an increase in spending. Because if your lifestyle rises as fast as your income, your financial freedom may barely move at all. Which brings us to level 4, the choice level. This is where wealth starts becoming less about accumulation and more about control. For many people, this happens somewhere around the low 6 figures in net worth. Maybe you've built $100,000. Maybe you've crossed $200,000. Your exact number depends on your age, location, family, debt, and cost of living. But the psychological change is similar. You realize you have options. You can leave a toxic job without immediately becoming homeless. You can take 6 months to build a business. You can move cities. You can take a pay cut for a better opportunity. You can say no to clients who treat you badly. And perhaps most importantly, you can buy time. This is where people misunderstand wealth. They think wealthy people buy expensive things. The more important thing they buy is the ability to control their calendar. Imagine waking up on Monday morning and realizing you don't have to spend the next 10 hours doing something you hate just because missing one paycheck would destroy your life. That's wealth, not the watch, not the car. The ability to choose. And once you experience that choice, your relationship with money changes again. You stop asking, how can I look richer? And start asking, what actually makes my life better? That's a much more powerful question, because the next level isn't about buying more. It's about optimizing. Level 5 is flexibility. You've built enough wealth that your decisions are no longer dominated by immediate financial consequences. You might have several $100,000 invested. Perhaps your business generates income without requiring every hour of your attention. Maybe your home is largely paid off. Maybe your investments produce meaningful cash flow. Whatever the exact structure, the important thing is this. You have multiple ways to survive, and that's incredibly powerful. If one income stream disappears, another exists. If one investment performs badly, your entire future doesn't collapse. If one career stops making sense, you have time to build another. Your financial life becomes more resilient, and resilience creates something even more valuable than confidence: patience. You don't need every investment to work immediately. You don't need every business idea to succeed. You don't need to chase every opportunity. You can wait. And the ability to wait is one of the most underrated advantages in finance. Poor decisions often happen because someone needs an outcome immediately. Wealth gives you the luxury of letting good decisions take time. At this level, you also start noticing something uncomfortable. More money doesn't automatically make you happier. There is a point where buying another thing produces almost no emotional difference. Another restaurant, another watch, another hotel, another upgrade. The first upgrade feels incredible. The 10th feels normal. And eventually, you start realizing that your biggest problems aren't things money can simply purchase. That realization takes you to level 6, the freedom level. This is where your assets can potentially cover a meaningful portion or even most of your lifestyle. You might have $1 million invested, maybe 2, maybe 5. The number depends entirely on your spending. A person spending $30,000 has a completely different financial reality from someone spending $300,000. That's why net worth alone doesn't define freedom. Your lifestyle matters. Your burn rate matters. Your obligations matter. And your ability to generate income matters. But when your assets become large enough that work becomes optional rather than mandatory, something profound happens. Your relationship with time changes. You stop thinking about your life in weekends. You stop counting vacation days. You stop waiting for Friday. And you start asking a completely different question. If I don't have to work for money, what am I actually going to do? That question sounds luxurious. But for some people, it's terrifying. Because work gave their days structure. The pursuit of money gave them a goal. The next promotion gave them something to chase. When the chase ends, you discover whether you actually built a life you enjoy. And that's why the final level isn't simply more money. It's wealth with purpose. Level 7. Legacy. At this point, money has become infrastructure. It protects your family. It creates opportunities. It funds businesses. It supports causes. It can outlive you. And the interesting thing is that people at this level often become less interested in displaying wealth. Because when money is no longer something you need to prove, there's little reason to constantly show it. The question changes. It's no longer, how much can I buy? It's, what can this money do? Can it give your children a better starting point? Can it fund something you believe should exist? Can it give someone an opportunity you never had? Can it create something that continues working after you're gone? This is where wealth becomes bigger than consumption. It becomes responsibility. And there's a strange irony here. At the beginning, money controls almost everything. At the end, money controls almost nothing. The goal isn't to become obsessed with the number. The goal is to reach the point where the number stops controlling you. That's the real progression. At the first level, you're trying to survive. At the second, you're trying to stabilize. At the third, you're building momentum. At the fourth, you're buying choices. At the fifth, you're buying flexibility. At the sixth, you're buying freedom. And at the seventh, you're deciding what your wealth is actually for. But there's one thing I want you to notice. None of these levels require you to become a different person overnight. You don't wake up one morning and magically become wealthy. You cross invisible lines through thousands of ordinary decisions. The automatic transfer you almost canceled. The raise you finally asked for. The credit card balance you stopped carrying. The investment you kept making during a market downturn. The expensive lifestyle upgrade you decided you didn't actually need. The business you started after work. The skill you spent 2 years learning. None of those moments look impressive on their own. But wealth is built from unimpressive moments repeated for a very long time. And that's why comparing yourself to someone already 10 levels ahead is almost useless. You don't need their house, you don't need their portfolio, you don't need their lifestyles. You need to know which level you're currently standing on and what the next level requires. If you're at survival, your goal is breathing room. If you're stable, your goal is momentum. If you're building momentum, protect it. If you've created options, use them wisely. If you've created freedom, don't waste it trying to impress people who aren't paying attention. And if you eventually reach the point where money becomes abundant, remember what the entire journey was supposed to accomplish. Not a bigger number on a screen, a bigger life. Because the strange thing about wealth is that the closer you get to the top, the less important money itself becomes. At the beginning, every dollar feels like survival. In the middle, every dollar feels like opportunity. And at the end, every dollar becomes a decision. A decision about your time, your family, your freedom, your impact, your life. So don't obsess over becoming wealthy overnight. Figure out your level. Understand what changes there. Build the next layer. Then repeat. Because wealth isn't one finish line. It's the gradual process of buying back the things money can never replace once they're gone. Your time, your choices, and eventually your freedom. That is what actually changes.